June 15, 1944, 04:45 hours, Saipan, Mariana Islands. The horizon is still dark, the first faint glow of dawn barely touching the edges of the Pacific. A humid wind sweeps across the Japanese command post dug into the cliffs above the western beaches. Inside, the air is thick, part sweat, part cigarette smoke, part dread. General Yoshitsugu Saitō stands motionless over a wooden map table, illuminated only by a flickering lantern. His uniform is damp from the night's heat. His jaw tightens with each distant rumble coming from the sea. At first, the officers think it is thunder. Then the ground trembles again, steady, rhythmic, unnatural. A young staff officer rushes in, breathless. "General, the enemy fleet, it stretches beyond sight." Saitō steps toward the opening of the bunker. The sky is brighter now, just enough to reveal what looks at first glance like a moving island. But it is not land, it is metal, endless rows of it. American battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, transports, landing craft by the hundreds. A machine coming toward them. He blinks once, then twice. Even for a man hardened by decades in the Imperial Army, the scale defies comprehension. "So this is their true strength," he reportedly mutters to no one. Behind him, another officer whispers a phrase that becomes almost a prayer. "Kaiju no bakemono." Monsters of the sea. The naval bombardment begins. A wall of sound slams into the island, so violent that dust rains from the bunker ceiling. Shells scream overhead like tearing steel. The ocean flashes white with muzzle fire. Saitō grips the table. For months, Tokyo had insisted the Americans were overextended, hesitant, weakened. But here, right in front of them, the truth arrives with thunderous clarity. The United States is not merely attacking. It is unveiling a kind of amphibious power Japan had never imagined possible. The question hangs in the shaking air. What do Japanese commanders say when they realize the ocean itself now belongs to the enemy? To understand what Japanese commanders say on June 15, 1944, we must step back, years back, into the shifting balance of the Pacific War, a struggle Japan once believed it could win. December 1941, mid-1942. Japan's early victories create an illusion of unstoppable momentum. The Imperial Navy sweeps through Southeast Asia. Singapore falls. The Philippines collapses. Tokyo broadcasts triumph, declaring the Pacific now a Japanese lake. Within military headquarters, optimism becomes doctrine. America is industrially powerful, yes, but supposedly soft, unwilling to fight a long war so far from home. But even during these early conquests, some Japanese officers quietly worry. They note the speed with which U.S. factories are converting automobile production into shipbuilding. They observe how American carriers, though battered, return to the fight again and again. Their fears prove prescient. Midway, June 1942. 4 Japanese carriers are destroyed in a single day. It is a strategic earthquake. When Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto receives the news, he writes in despair that the battle decided the fate of our Navy. But the Imperial General Staff chooses not to internalize the scale of the loss. Japan tells itself America has been checked. America, meanwhile, prepares for something larger than Japan's planners can comprehend. 1943, early 1944, America builds a new kind of war machine. While Japanese shipyards struggle to replace even a handful of cruisers, U.S. industrial output surges into unimaginable volumes. By early 1944, American yards are producing landing ship tanks LSDs at nearly 1 per day, Liberty ships at 3 per week, escort carriers in numbers Japan cannot track fast enough, thousands of smaller landing craft designed specifically for amphibious assaults. This is not a navy built to fight at sea. This is a navy built to take islands, one after another, until reaching the Japanese homeland. Japanese field commanders hear rumors about this American amphibious monster, but few believe the full scale. Reports coming from the Aleutians, Tarawa, and Kwajalein speak of overwhelming fire support, coordinated air and sea operations, and massed troops landing with clockwork precision. Tokyo dismisses many of these accounts as exaggerations or excuses from defeated units. The Marianas, Japan's shield line. By spring 1944, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam become linchpins of Japan's defensive ring. Losing them would place the Japanese homeland within bombing range of the new American B-29 superfortress. Every Japanese commander understands the stakes. If the Marianas fall, the war shifts from distant struggle to approaching catastrophe. Thus, Tokyo dispatches strict orders. Fight to the last man. The Marianas must not fall. General Saitō fortifies Saipan with caves, bunkers, and ridgeline defenses. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, hero of Pearl Harbor but now commanding ground-based naval units, arrives on the island as well. Both men expect an attack. Both expect American naval strength. But neither expects what is coming. Because no Japanese commander has yet seen, directly, with his own eyes, the full machinery of American amphibious warfare when it is fully assembled. That revelation will come at dawn on June 15, 1944. And it will shock them into statements history never forgets. June 15, 1944, 05:20 hours. The first waves of American landing craft push towards Saipan's beaches in tight formation. Engines roar. Naval gunfire continues its measured, crushing rhythm. Inside the Japanese command post, officers crowd around observation slits and field binoculars, witnessing something none of them have ever seen before. General Yoshitsugu Saitō watches in silence at first, his hands clasped behind his back, knuckles whitening. The scale of the approaching force becomes clearer with each passing minute. Columns of Higgins boats, clusters of LCI gunboats, waves of LVTs rolling over the surf like mechanical beasts. A staff officer breaks the silence. "General, they just keep coming." Another murmurs, almost disbelieving. This is not an attack. This is a moving city." According to post-war accounts, one senior officer, Colonel Hitoshi Kanyama, reportedly says in a low, shaken voice, "This must be the industrial power we feared, now made real." Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stands beside Saitō. Once the architect of Pearl Harbor, he now watches the U.S. Navy deploy an amphibious capability far beyond what Japanese naval intelligence had predicted. His face remains stern, but his eyes betray devastation. He reportedly mutters, "So this is the revenge of Pearl Harbor, not in words but in steel." Outside, American LVTs, tracked, armored, and relentless, climb the reef that Japanese defenders had expected to cripple the invasion force. Instead, the machines glide over it with shocking ease. One officer gasps. They're using armored landing vehicles. The reef means nothing to them. Reports from forward Japanese positions begin to flood in. Enemy landing craft in hundreds. Gunboats destroying pillboxes. Armored vehicles at the waterline. Artillery positions lost, communication cut. Saitō listens to each message. His jaw tightens. He nods once and says, calmly but grimly, "This is not the enemy of 1942. Prepare for total engagement." A messenger from the coastal batteries arrives, shaking. "Sir, we fired everything. Nothing stops them." Nagumo closes his eyes for a moment. "The sea is theirs," he reportedly whispers, spoken not as defeatism, but as recognition of a transformed enemy. Then comes the moment that defines the Japanese High Command's reaction. As the 1st Battalions of the U.S. 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions hit the shore, Saitō turns to his officers. Every man will fight. If we cannot stop them at the beach, we will bleed them inland. But even he knows the truth now, though he cannot say it aloud. Japan is facing an opponent who has mastered the art of taking islands and will not stop. June 15, 1944, late morning. The beaches of Saipan burn with smoke and shattered palm trees as American Marines establish their first footholds. Offshore, U.S. naval guns continue to pulse like thunder, firing with clockwork discipline. Inland, Japanese command posts receive wave after wave of grim reports. General Saitō stands over the field telephone, listening to fragmented voices from the coastal defenders. Pillbox 3 destroyed. Mortar crews wiped out. Enemy amphibious tanks advancing past the reef. Every message reflects the same haunting reality. Japan's shoreline defenses, once believed impenetrable, are collapsing under the sheer weight of American amphibious coordination. Colonel Kanyama, still pale from the morning's shock, states quietly, "General, they land with armor, infantry, artillery, and air power as one. We have never faced such unity of force." Saitō nods, his expression stern but resigned. This is their new doctrine. They strike from sea and air together. Admiral Nagumo, now overseeing the remnants of naval air personnel fighting as infantry, receives reconnaissance updates from surviving spotters. One message barely comes through the static. American landing craft still arriving. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. He closes his notebook. "This operation dwarfs Midway," he reportedly says, "and it is only one island." By midday, U.S. Marines push inland, exploiting weak spots in the Japanese line. The 4th Marine Division captures key sections of Beach Red and Green, while the 2nd Marine Division consolidates control over the southern beachfront. Japanese artillery attempts sporadic bombardments, but American naval counterfire neutralizes gun positions within minutes. A junior officer bursts into the command post. "Sir, the enemy's naval fire control is too fast. We shoot once, they answer tenfold." Said responds with the calm of a man who already understands the outcome. "Then we withdraw to the high ground. The interior will be our battlefield." Throughout the afternoon and evening, Japanese forces retreat into caves, ravines, and fortified ridges. Their strategy shifts from repelling an invasion to inflicting maximum casualties in the brutal inland fighting that will follow. Tokyo broadcasts optimistic messages, claiming Japan is holding firm and that the American advance is slow. But inside the command post, the truth is undeniable. One officer writes in his diary that night, "The enemy lands with the energy of an entire nation. We are a garrison, they are a factory." And as darkness falls over Saipan, Saitō gives the order that marks the moment Japan shifts from defense to grim determination. "Prepare for night counterattacks. We will fight until nothing remains." The reactions of Japanese commanders on June 15, 1944 echo far beyond the shores of Saipan. Their shock, spoken in whispers, muttered in disbelief, recorded in fragments, is more than emotional. It marks the moment Japan's high command confronts a reality long denied. The United States has built an amphibious machine capable of dismantling an empire island by island. Tokyo's leadership circle, late June 1944. Reports from Saipan filter back to the Imperial General Staff, each message darker than the last. Accounts describe American landings that are continuous, mechanized, and supported by naval fire too intense for counterattack. One senior officer in Tokyo writes in his notebook, "If this is their method, no island can resist them." The shock triggers strategic panic. Japan scrambles to assemble the remnants of its carrier fleet for what will become the Battle of the Philippine Sea, a desperate, last-hope attempt to crush American naval dominance. But the battle ends in disaster. Japan loses hundreds of aircraft and nearly all trained naval aviators. American pilots nickname it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. From that point forward, Japan's ability to stop U.S. amphibious assaults effectively collapses. The industrial divide becomes unavoidable. Historians later emphasize what Japanese commanders first grasped on Saipan's shores. A single American amphibious operation could bring to bear more ships, more men, more vehicles, and more firepower than Japan could deploy in an entire theater. Throughout the late war campaigns, Leyte, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the pattern repeats. American transports, landing ships, and armored amphibious vehicles arrive in staggering numbers. Japanese defenders often brace for an invasion force they believe they can overwhelm, only to watch an even larger force appear behind it. What Japanese officers saw at Saipan becomes a template for the rest of the Pacific War. The Marianas fall changes everything. When Saipan, Tinian, and Guam fall, the consequences ripple across the entire conflict. B-29 bombers now have bases within range of Tokyo. The Imperial Navy suffers a strategic collapse from which it never recovers. Japan's defensive perimeter shatters. Civilian morale in Tokyo plummets after the emperor is informed Saipan is lost. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo resigns shortly after, his government unable to deny the catastrophe. Historians today view Saipan and the Japanese commanders' stunned reaction to American amphibious power as the moment the Pacific War's outcome becomes inevitable. The empire's strategic myths die on that beach. What remains is resignation, desperation, and the slow march toward 1945. The morning of June 15, 1944 lingers in history not only as a military operation, but as a moment of revelation, one in which Japanese commanders confronted a force they could neither outbuild nor outfight. In the dimly lit bunkers of Saipan, as American amphibious waves rolled toward the shore, officers who had once marched under banners of expansion now stood face to face with the industrial heartbeat of a nation determined to end the war. Their words, astonished, resigned, sometimes whispered in disbelief, capture the human dimension behind the strategy, shock at the endless fleets, respect for the coordination of sea, air, and infantry, quiet recognition that the empire's defensive perimeter had cracked, and beneath it all the bitter understanding that Japan's war, once framed as a bold gamble, had become a countdown. What unfolded on Saipan was not merely the loss of an island. It was the collapse of a worldview, a realization born in the sound of naval guns and the sight of steel waves advancing across the Pacific. Yet within this tragedy lies a larger lesson, one echoed by historians and veterans alike. Wars are not decided solely by bravery or belief. They are shaped by logistics, industrial capacity, strategic foresight, and the willingness of nations to endure unimaginable costs. The Japanese commanders on Saipan fought with courage, but courage alone could not stand against a nation capable of filling the ocean with machines. In the end, the voices inside that command post, astonished, grim, reflective, are reminders of the human cost of miscalculation. And as the Pacific slowly quieted in the years that followed, their words remained, carried across time like distant surf. The sea that once protected Japan had become the very path through which its fate arrived.